Before meeting Heather, my life was quite ordinary. I focused intently on building my career, dedicating most of my time to advancing innovative renewable energy systems. Social interactions were limited, centered mostly around work or occasional gatherings with close friends. My routine was steady, predictable, and primarily solitary. Things changed when I chose to attend a friend's wedding, despite my usual aversion to large events. That's where I met Heather, a vibrant and competitive woman who instantly caught my attention. We connected immediately, our shared ambitions bridging the gap between our contrasting personalities. Heather's energy and determination balanced my reserved and contemplative nature, making us a well-matched pair. By the time our story begins, Heather and I had been married for 6 years. I vividly recall the affection at our wedding. Standing before 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids and groomsmen, and $20,000 worth of flowers, asking, "Do you, Heather Mary Stanton, take Noah Alexander Clark to be your lawful husband, forsaking all others, until death do you part?" Her affirmative reply, paired with a loving glance, felt like a solemn vow of fidelity. I made a similar commitment, returning her gaze with equal sincerity. I've always believed Heather and I make a strong team because we share common life goals and interests, though our differences add a dynamic edge to our relationship. Heather's lifelong involvement in sports highlights her competitive spirit, while I take a more relaxed approach, valuing consensus over competition. Despite my athletic build, sports never captivated me the way they do here. Heather's outgoing nature helps her form numerous casual friendships, whereas I enjoy socializing, but prefer a few deep, meaningful connections, a reflection of my upbringing in a wealthy, well-mannered family. Heather, who attended one of the most prestigious colleges in the eastern United States, works as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She secured this high-paying job thanks not only to her education and intelligence, but also to her appearance. It seems the pharmaceutical industry favors attractive individuals to influence hospitals and doctors, perhaps distracting them from financial incentives. Standing 5 feet 7 inches, weighing 120 pounds, with long blonde hair, a captivating smile, and almost neon green eyes, Heather excels in her role. Her success earned her a lucrative territory to manage, though it requires her to travel 3 nights a week and occasionally over weekends. The nature of my main product's niche market means I have to be away frequently, Heather once explained. While I understand, I dislike her absences, I feel lonely and yearn for companionship. Often, I pass the time by watching TV, occasionally meeting male friends for movies, sports events, or bowling. My job, on the other hand, rarely requires travel. I work from home, selling proprietary computer software and hardware that optimize renewable energy systems, seamlessly integrating them into the electrical grid. I've invented and patented several products and oversee equipment production at a suburban facility only a few hours each week. Being home during the day allows me to know most of the neighbors in rare and luxury apartment buildings where residents usually only meet at monthly gatherings. Some have urged me to become president of the condominium association, but I've avoided that responsibility, opting instead to handle its accounting. Our building features 4 duplex apartments and 1 single-level unit per floor. Duplexes, like ours on the 5th floor, 5A, include an office, 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a spacious living room, and 3 full bathrooms. Single-level apartments, like 5B next door, have a small living room, 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a powder room. Unit 5B is rented by a young woman named Eva Carter, who appears too young to afford the steep rent. Eva, about 23, often draws curiosity from neighbors, as Heather and I, both 29, do for owning rather than renting our unit. Most neighbors are away during weekdays, so they probably don't notice Eva's frequent visitors, 2 to 4 men daily. Her appearance in the steady stream of male guests led me to suspect she might be a high-priced companion. Despite my suspicions, I've never brought it up during our brief encounters at the pool or gym, mainly because she's discreet and it's not a topic for casual conversation. Eva usually dresses modestly, wearing a conservative one-piece swimsuit at the pool and shorts and t-shirts at the gym. In the halls, she favors long-sleeve shirts and pants. In public, her shiny brown hair is often tied in a bun, and she wears oversized black glasses that seem more for disguise than function. Even without makeup, her natural beauty shines through, though she appears to downplay it when not entertaining clients. Around that first year, Eva's striking beauty was impossible to ignore. She had an almost flawless face, a curvaceous figure that even modest outfits couldn't completely hide, incredibly long legs, artistically proportioned hips, and a sculpted backside. Standing nearly 5 feet 10 inches, she was slim, but not overly so. My interactions with Eva during this time were friendly but distant. We knew each other's full names, exchanged polite smiles, and greeted each other when we crossed paths. Occasionally, we chatted casually at the gym, pool, or even once at the local Trader Joe's, where we spent 5 minutes discussing the best ways to prepare organic vegetables, a shared passion for healthy living. Things shifted dramatically one Thursday afternoon, while Heather was away for work and wouldn't return until the following evening. I was heading out for one of my routine trips to the manufacturing plant when I heard shouting from Eva's apartment. 5B. Such noise was unusual in our soundproof building. Concerned, I stopped to listen and distinctly heard what sounded like a man hitting a woman. I knocked firmly and shouted, "Superintendent, open up." There was a pause, then a deep voice growled, "Screw off. We don't need anything." Still hearing muffled sobbing, I barked back, "Open the door, or I'll call the authorities." The door swung open, revealing a towering, angry man who yelled, "It's none of your business. Get away from me and my girlfriend." He started to say more, but I saw Eva crumpled on the floor, blood visible. Without hesitation, I grabbed a self-defense tool from my keychain. Though I rarely used it, I knew it could deliver a powerful punch. I swung at his mouth with full force, striking him twice more as I advanced. On the third hit, he tripped over Eva's body, fell, and hit his head on the marble floor, knocking himself out. I helped Eva up and guided her to a chair, closing the door behind us. She had a black eye, a bloody nose, and scratches on her arms and legs. She wore only an egg leg, and though I tried to focus on her injuries, her stunning figure was hard to ignore. "Are you okay?" I asked clumsily. "Can I get you something?" She moaned softly. "I'm hurting, but I'll be fine. Could you grab some paper towels and a cold compress?" I quickly fetched what she needed, then helped clean her up as she applied the compress to her eye. "Who is that guy?" I asked, nodding toward the unconscious man. "An angry customer," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. "We should call the authorities," I said. She immediately shook her head. It was clear she wanted no involvement with law enforcement, likely due to her profession. After some back and forth, I relented. "I have an idea," I said. "Do you trust me to handle him?" "Yes," she murmured, "as long as it's not here." I went to my apartment, grabbed zip ties, water, a bottle of liquor, and some sleeping pills Heather kept in her stash of legal pharmaceuticals. Returning to Eva's, I bound the man's hands behind his back with zip ties and splashed cold water on his face. He woke up groggily, and I propped him up, guiding him downstairs after retrieving his car keys. He was too heavy to carry, so I half-dragged him to the parking lot. I found his car, seated him in the driver's seat, and convinced him that the pills were painkillers to make him feel better. I stayed with him, talking calmly until the pills took effect. Once he was barely conscious, I poured liquor into his mouth, making sure he appeared drunk before cutting the ties and leaving them in my pocket. I started the car, locked it, and called the authorities anonymously, reporting an intoxicated individual asleep in a parked vehicle. Not waiting for the authorities to arrive, I returned to Eva's apartment. Her door was slightly ajar, so I knocked gently and called out, "Eva, it's Noah. Can I come in and check on you?" From inside, she weakly said, "Of course, come in." She was on the couch, now wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt over her nightgown, leaning back with compresses on her eye and nose. "How are you holding up?" I asked softly, stepping inside. When I reached Eva, I gently removed her hand and the compress from her eye. The injury didn't look good at all. "You really need to go to the emergency room," I said firmly. She immediately began to object, but I didn't let her finish. "Eva, I'm not a doctor, but this isn't something to leave unchecked. It could be more serious than it looks, and I'm taking you to the hospital. You don't have a choice in this. Now, wear your shoes and purse." She hesitated, then pointed toward them without a word. I knelt to help her into her shoes, and as I did, I couldn't help but notice her perfectly shaped legs. I scolded myself internally for even letting the thought cross my mind, and stood quickly to help her walk. We made our way down the hallway and into the building's lobby. I noticed the authorities near the entrance, busy dealing with the man I had left in his car. They had smashed the passenger side window, turned off the engine, dragged the guy out, and loaded him into their van, just as a tow truck arrived to take the car. I carefully guided Eva out another door to avoid the scene. Once we were in my car, I called my production team. "I'll be late today," I told them, explaining briefly that something personal had come up. At the hospital, I helped Eva register. She seemed nervous, but I stayed with her, making sure the paperwork was correct and confirming that her health insurance would cover the visit. "Here," I said, handing her my business card after everything was settled. "It has my cell phone number on it. Call me when you're done, and I'll come back to take you home." She looked up at me, her expression uncertain. "You've already done so much for me," she began, but I interrupted her again. "Eva, listen. Just call me. You might need help getting your medication or something else. I'll be here in 10 minutes if you need me. I don't have anything pressing today, so don't hesitate." She gave me a weak smile and nodded. "Okay, thank you," she said softly. I patted her lightly on the head, smiled, and left the hospital. Later that afternoon, I was finishing up my work at the manufacturing plant when my phone rang. "Hey, Noah, it's Eva," came her voice, stronger than when I dropped her off. "Are you ready to leave?" I asked. "I can hail a taxi if you're busy," she replied hesitantly. "I'm not busy," I assured her cheerfully. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Traffic's a little slow, but I'll come right to the emergency room entrance." "Thank you," she said quickly, her tone grateful. When I arrived, Eva was waiting just outside, her face bandaged over one eye, with cotton still in her nose. I helped her into the car, and we made a stop at the pharmacy to pick up her prescribed pain medication and ointment. Then we headed back to the apartment building. As we entered the elevator, I asked, "How about I bring you something to eat for dinner?" She started to refuse. "You don't need to go out of your way. I want to," I interrupted her. "Otherwise, I'll just eat alone." "What do you think about chicken fingers and fresh vegetables?" I asked. She hesitated, but I quickly added, with a smile, "Everything is organic." She laughed lightly at that, her mood softening. "What if I come by at 6 with the food already prepared? Does that sound good?" I asked. She smiled faintly and reached into her purse, pulling out a key. "Here," she said, handing it to me. "So you don't have to knock. Just come in." At 6 sharp, I unlocked Eva's door with the keys she had given me and stepped inside. For the first time, I had a chance to really look around her apartment. It was sparsely but elegantly decorated, with tasteful furniture and several striking original paintings on the walls. While they weren't masterpieces, they were vibrant and clearly created by someone talented. Eva greeted me warmly from the kitchen table, her demeanor far stronger than it had been earlier. I served dinner, and we sat down together to eat. "I can't drink wine with these painkillers," she said as I started to pour her a glass. I immediately stopped. "Sorry, I didn't think about that." I apologized, but she grinned mischievously. "It's not allowed, but I could use a couple of glasses," she said, nodding toward the bottle. Laughing, I poured her a small amount. "You're not planning to take advantage of me if I get tipsy, are you?" she teased. "That would make me worse than the guy earlier," I replied, smirking. "Besides, if you pass out, I'll just have to carry you back to bed." She laughed softly, taking a sip of the wine. After dinner, I cleared the table and noticed that the wine, combined with the medication, was beginning to affect her slightly. Though she was still coherent, her mood had shifted, and she seemed more contemplative. "You probably think I'm terrible for entertaining men," she said suddenly, her gaze fixed on the table. I looked at her seriously. "Of course not. How you earn your living is your business. It doesn't bother me in the slightest." She finally met my eyes with her uncovered one. "How long have you known?" she asked cautiously. "About a month after you moved in," I replied simply. "Does Heather know?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "No, Heather is rarely here, and even if she were, it's not something I'd discuss. I don't gossip about my neighbors, especially good ones," I answered sincerely. Eva seemed to relax, and we talked more openly. "You're the only straight guy I've known since I moved in who hasn't hit on me," she said. "Why is that?" she asked, half teasing. "Because I take my marriage vows seriously," I replied. "More than 90% of my clients are married," she countered. "Well, I'm not one of them," I said firmly. "If you're wondering, yes, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. But I've never been interested in purely physical relationships. I need emotional connection, and without that, the experience is meaningless to me." She studied me silently for a moment before saying, "Even with all the clients I see, I feel lonely. I don't have friends. My work makes that impossible." Our conversation turned deeply personal. She revealed her hopes of leaving her line of work by the time she turned 30, with enough savings to start a new life. "I want to have a spouse, maybe children someday. Someone to be my one and only. And for me to be theirs," she admitted quietly. "But for now, everything's on hold until these injuries heal." An idea came to me. "What if you worked for me in the meantime?" I suggested. Eva tensed, glaring at me. "I thought you were different," she said sharply. "Let me explain," I said quickly, realizing my mistake. "Not that kind of work. I need help with paperwork. I'm hopelessly behind, and it's something even a cyclops could do." I joked, earning a reluctant giggle. "But I can't pay your normal rate," I added with a grin. "What, $700 an hour? $2,500 a night?" she teased back, blushing. "I can offer $25 an hour and occasional free food," I said. She laughed at that. "Deal," she said. "Show me on Monday, and I'll decide." As the evening wound down, it was clear she was exhausted. I gathered my things to leave. She hugged me briefly, whispering, "Thank you so much." I hugged her back, careful to keep the gesture friendly, though I felt a stir of emotions I tried hard to suppress. "Get some rest," I said, patting her on the head before leaving. Despite the emotional weight of the evening, I couldn't help but feel it had been meaningful, a night spent with a friend, not clouded by any ulterior motives or expectations. On Friday morning, while I worked in my apartment, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Eva standing there, dressed in her usual modest clothing and smiling brightly. "Hi, Noah," she said warmly. "Hello, Eva. Feeling better today?" I asked, matching her cheerful tone. She chuckled. "It still hurts like hell, but I'm in a better mood." She paused, glancing down briefly before continuing. "You probably want your key back." I started to reach for it on the table in the foyer, but she quickly said, "No, why don't you keep it? In case I need rescuing again." And the guy doesn't answer the door. Before I could respond, she added, "I'm here because I need a favor. I hate to ask after everything you've already done, but I desperately need groceries. The doctor says I can't drive while taking pain pills or wearing this blindfold." I grinned, relieved it was something so manageable. "Of course. How about in an hour?" Her face lit up as she clapped her hands. 1:30 works perfectly. Just knock on my door when you're ready. Grocery shopping with Eva turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. Usually, I didn't mind shopping, but I never found it fun until now. Eva made it lively, cracking jokes, humorously talking to the vegetables as if they were people and turning a mundane chore into an entertaining outing. By the time we got back, we were both laughing over her conversation with a particularly stubborn head of lettuce. The following Monday, Eva arrived at my apartment shortly after Heather left for work. I showed her how to organize the piles of paperwork scattered around my office and the living room. Though she wasn't fast, she was meticulous, which was more important for the task. We broke for lunch, worked a bit more, and later I took her to the pharmacy to pick up supplies. This became the start of a deep friendship between us. Eva once confided that I was likely the only male friend she'd had since she was 18. "Every man I meet just wants to sleep with me," she said, her tone tinged with resignation. It wasn't that I didn't find her attractive. She was, without a doubt, the most stunning woman I'd ever met. But I was married. My vows mattered to me, and I didn't view Eva as an object of desire. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and far more complex than most people gave her credit for. Her presence filled the void during the nights and weekends when Heather was away. Eva and I spent those evenings going out or simply relaxing at home. Once she fully recovered, about a month after her ordeal, she resumed her work. Despite this, she insisted on continuing to help me with my business paperwork. I quickly realized how sharp she was, far beyond what her job as a companion suggested. Encouraged by her intellectual curiosity, I began teaching her more about my business. When I tried to pay her for her assistance, she often imposed unusual conditions. "Double payment if you let me swim in your pool first," she'd joke. Other times, she refused payment entirely, which seemed to bring her more joy than accepting money. I admired her honesty and generosity. Once, she spent hours tracking down the owner of a small purse containing nearly $100, which had been left at the pool. She returned it without taking a reward. Another time, she told me about a client who fell ill during an appointment. She not only got into the hospital, but also refunded his money, despite his protests. Eva had a knack for small, selfless acts, tipping the paperboy extra, saving stray animals, and never gossiping about anyone, even those who deserved it. About 8 months into our friendship, Eva surprised me by showing me a completed application for the local community college. "I'm applying for an associate degree in business administration," she announced proudly, her face glowing with excitement. "Can you help me with my homework sometimes?" "Of course I will," I said sincerely. "I'm so proud of you." Beaming, she ran to hug me tightly. I hugged her back carefully, but this time her embrace lingered longer than usual. I felt her warmth, and though I tried to remain composed, I worried she might notice my emotions. If she did, she didn't mention it, and we both moved on as though nothing had happened. Surprisingly, Heather didn't seem jealous of my friendship with Eva. I attributed this to a few reasons. Eva and I were discreet, showing no signs of affection in public. In private, our closeness never crossed the line beyond hugs or a chaste kiss on the cheek. Additionally, Eva began helping Heather with her paperwork, which my wife appreciated immensely. To cement the illusion, I convinced a longtime friend of mine, a discreetly gay man, to pose as Eva's boyfriend at condo events. It was a clever cover that allowed Eva to attend parties without being overwhelmed by unwanted attention. But life rarely stays smooth for long. One Sunday morning, Heather received an urgent call and rushed out of town for work. She seemed unusually flustered, hurriedly pulling a disorganized pile of documents from her briefcase and leaving them on the coffee table. "Can Eva sort these before I get back Wednesday night?" she asked. "Of course," I replied. I was disappointed, as we planned to go apple picking that day, an outing I always looked forward to. After Heather left, I texted Eva. "Heather's gone for work. Want to pick apples this afternoon?" She quickly replied, "Let's go at 11 or after 2. We decided on 2. The outing was delightful. We laughed as we picked apples and enjoyed cider donuts together. College students ogled Eva, trying to sneak glances down her shorts while she climbed a ladder. She handled it with her usual good humor. That evening, after dinner at my place, we planned to watch a movie. As I loaded the DVD, Eva noticed a stack of papers Heather had left behind. "What's this?" she asked, picking them up. "Documents Heather asked you organize," I replied without much thought. As she gathered the scattered sheets, something slipped out and fell to the floor. Busy with the DVD player, I didn't notice right away. When I finally turned, I froze at the expression on Eva's face. She was sitting on the sofa, holding something in her hands, her face pale and traumatized. "What's that?" I asked, concerned. She stammered, "Ah, nothing," and quickly tucked the object, a photograph, back into the stack of papers. Eva wasn't much of a poker player. Her expression betrayed her. This wasn't nothing. I walked over, my curiosity piqued. "Let me see what you were looking at," I said. "No, it's nothing," she insisted, standing and trying to leave the room with the papers. Her behavior only made me more determined. Gently, I took her hand. "Hey, come on, I really need to see this. What's going on?" As I eased the papers from her grasp, she sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. I thumbed through the stack until I found what she'd seen, 3 6x9 photographs. Each one showed Heather, unclothed and intimate with a different man. My stomach churned as I stared at the images, unable to process them. One photo remained in my hand as the others in the stack of papers slipped to the floor. I sat on the carpet, stunned. Eva placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice filled with regret. "No, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I muttered, almost to myself, "She only got that butterfly tattoo on her left shoulder 2 years ago." Eva, trying to stay positive, said, "Maybe these are old photos from before you were married." I shook my head slowly, my mind reeling. After a long silence, Eva gently asked, "Is there anything I can do?" Without looking at her, I finally said, "Eva, I need time alone to think this through. Even though you're my best friend, I don't want to talk to anyone right now." She hugged me tightly before leaving, and though neither of us said anything, I knew she was crying too. Once she was gone, I sat on the floor for another half hour, tears streaming down my face. Finally, I stood, looked in the mirror, and slapped myself. "Action, not pity, you weakling," I said aloud. Fueled by anger and adrenaline, I began a frantic search of the apartment. I tore through Heather's dresser drawers, the boxes on her closet shelves, and the files in her home office. One locked drawer in her desk yielded at least a dozen incriminating pieces of evidence, more photos, receipts, and notes. The question wasn't if Heather had cheated on me, but how long it had been going on, and with how many men. I cycled through emotions: anger, humiliation, shock, but the most persistent thought was, how could I have been so naive? I didn't sleep that night. By Monday morning, I was a wreck, exhausted and unkempt. I attempted to work but made little progress, my mind too clouded. Around 2 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Eva stood there with a jug of margaritas, a surprising sight since I'd never known her to drink much. "Listen, stud," she said, striding into the apartment. "I canceled my meeting today, called your production assistants, and told them you're not working. We're getting drinks, and tomorrow you'll figure out what to do about your wife." I started to protest, but she silenced me with a firm look. She picked up the scattered papers from the night before, tossed them toward the fake fireplace, leaving only the 3 damning photos aside, and handed me a glass of margarita. I took a sip and winced as it burned. Eva was relentless, pouring more drinks and sharing outrageous, hilarious stories in an effort to lift my spirits. After about 6 drinks, or maybe more, I lost count. I finally laughed. For the first time in days, I felt a bit lighter. At some point, I passed out on the floor, the alcohol having done its job. When I stirred, it was dark outside. I lay sprawled on the floor next to the sofa where Eva slept, one of her arms dangling down, touching my shoulder. The sound of ringing reached my ears. It was a landline phone. Groggily, I stumbled toward it and saw Heather's number on the caller ID. Without hesitation, I unplugged the phone, returned to the sofa, and nudged Eva over so I could lie beside her. Fully clothed, we both fell into a deep, alcohol-induced sleep. Around 4 a.m., I woke up. Eva was also stirring. She smiled groggily, her first words teasing, "You're the first guy I've ever slept with who didn't mess me up." Her comment caught me off guard, and I started laughing. "When you see yourself in the mirror, you'll understand why. Broomhilda," I joked. "You're no prize either," she shot back, squinting at me. "To be honest, I can't even tell if I'm looking at your face or your back." We both burst into hysterical laughter. Eventually, we got up, drank water, and freshened up before collapsing again, this time fully clothed on the bed. By morning, the smell of bacon and eggs woke me. I stumbled downstairs to find Eva in the kitchen, cooking. "Breakfast for two," she sang in a cheerful voice. "I thought I'd need dynamite to wake you," I groaned, catching my reflection in a nearby mirror. "This is the worst I've ever seen," I said aloud, cringing. Eva, by contrast, was radiant. She'd showered, changed into fresh clothes, and applied light makeup. She looked stunning. "No one should look this good after a night like that," I muttered. "I hang out with you for your charm, not your looks," she quipped, flipping an egg. "Now sit down and try to hide your face behind a cereal box so I can eat in peace." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started eating. The food was incredible, and I inhaled everything on my plate, even swiping a quarter of Eva's bagel. "You're lucky I like you," she said, laughing as I devoured the last bite. After breakfast, Eva cleaned up and turned to me with a serious expression. She cupped my face in her hands, locking eyes with me. "I have a full schedule today and an overnight trip, but I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Let me know if there's anything I can do. But Noah, you have to talk to Heather before you make any big decisions. Do you hear me?" I nodded, murmuring, "Okay." Eva kissed me lightly on the lips for the first time, a chaste but deliberate gesture, and added, "Now, go shower, shave, and brush your teeth. You're disgusting." She laughed as she walked out the door. By Tuesday evening, I'd sobered up, cleaned the apartment, and meticulously documented all the evidence, saving it digitally on a flash drive. I avoided talking to anyone except my assistant and production foreman. My phone was full of missed calls and messages from Heather, her parents, and even mine. I ignored them all, content to leave everything unanswered. At least for now. My landline remained disconnected, and my silence was the only response I could manage. On Wednesday morning, 12 hours earlier than expected, Heather burst into the apartment, her face full of worry. I was sitting in the living room, and when I saw her, I turned away. "Noah, I was so worried," she exclaimed, her voice laced with genuine concern. "You weren't answering your calls, and I thought something had happened. What could possibly be wrong, my dear faithful wife?" I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Her face went pale, and she raised a trembling hand to her mouth. Her eyes darted to the coffee table, with a stack of neatly arranged papers now resting. She began shaking visibly. I grabbed her hand and led her to the kitchen, where I had spread out the damning evidence. "Let me show you my little pile of treats," I said bitterly. "Maybe you can explain this mess." Heather broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Through choking gasps, she began to babble. "Noah, I love you. It didn't mean anything. I just got so competitive. I wanted to be #1 in sales, and I made a few bad business deals. I'll stop, I swear. We can get through this. You're the only one for me. I'll get pregnant, and we can start a family. Please, Noah." Her excuses and pleas blurred into a repetitive stream of apologies and promises. I snapped. Without a word, I stormed into the master bedroom, yanked all of her clothes from the closet and dresser drawers, and dumped them in the guest room. Some landed on the bed, most ended up in a messy heap on the floor. Heather stood sobbing in the hallway, eventually collapsing to her knees as I worked. When I finished, I retrieved the lock I had purchased the day before and installed it on the master bedroom door, while Heather wept, chanting, "No, no, no." I didn't care. Once the master bedroom and my office, already equipped with a secure lock, were off limits, I left. I spent the day at the production site, went to lunch, and then to the cinema, trying to distance myself from the chaos. When I returned home at 11 p.m., Heather was still there, sitting on the sofa. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. Her mother, Helen, and her sister, Sue, were with her. "Why are you here, Helen?" I asked coldly, addressing my mother-in-law. She'd always struck me as a condescending snob, but I had made an effort to stay cordial for Heather's sake. That effort was gone. "Noah," Helen said, startled by my tone. "Sue and I want to help. Heather made a mistake, but we can work through this together." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it now? Did Heather show you the photos, Helen?" I asked sarcastically, looking pointedly at Heather. She lowered her eyes, avoiding my gaze. "Do you know what you can do, Helen?" I continued. "Help Heather sort out those 34 other men she was involved with. Then maybe we'll talk." Without waiting for a response, I walked into the master bedroom and locked the door behind me. Surprisingly, I slept well that night. When I woke up the next morning, Heather was gone. She'd left a note on the coffee table. "Noah, I've decided to stay with Mom and Dad until you calm down and we can talk. Please don't throw away our future. We can get through this. I love you. Heather." By Monday morning, Heather received divorce papers at her parents' house. There were two sets. One proposed a divorce by mutual consent with a 50-50 split of our property, citing irreconcilable differences. The other was more aggressive, filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity, with 5 damning pieces of evidence attached. I included a simple note: "I haven't filed either of these yet. Take your pick. I need to hear from you by 9 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't, I'll file the second option. Have a nice life." That evening, around 6 p.m., Eva even knocked on my door, her smile wide and infectious. "Let's go eat pizza, my treat," she announced. I don't think I started, but she cut me off. "You don't have a single excuse not to go." "Let's go," I sighed. "Fine, let me grab my wallet." "You don't need it. I'm treating." "Just grab your keys," she said, plucking them from the table and handing them to me. She took my hand and practically dragged me out of the apartment. We ate at our favorite pizzeria, known for its organic ingredients. Eva did her best to lift my spirits, cracking jokes and steering the conversation to light-hearted topics. It worked, though I wasn't my usual self. As we sat in a secluded corner of the restaurant, Eva reached across the table and took my hand. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. I sent her 2 sets of divorce papers this morning, one conciliatory, the other hostile. I told her it's her choice, but I'll serve one of them tomorrow. "No chance of reconciliation?" Eva asked, her eyes searching mine. I fought long and hard about this. I said, "I can't forgive or forget. Loyalty is everything to me. And clearly, it doesn't mean anything to her. I don't even plan to speak with her again." Eva looked at me intently, her gaze flickering between my hand and my eyes. After a long pause, she said, "When your divorce is final, I want to be first." "What?" I asked, certain I had misheard. "You're my best friend," she continued, her voice steady. "But I'm also in love with you. As soon as we go on our first date, I'll quit my job. I don't care if I find another one right away, or if it pays anything at all. I have enough savings to last, and I want you. I'll make it work if you give me a chance." I was stunned. I had no idea Eva felt this way. She misread my silence as reluctance. I know you probably don't want an ex-companion as your girlfriend, she said quietly. But I promise. Shut up, I interrupted, standing suddenly. Leaning across the table, I kissed her hard on the lips. After a moment of surprise, she rose from her seat, and we kissed passionately. When we finally broke apart, I sat down, breathless. If you're crazy enough to be in love with me, I said, here's my plan. We keep things as they are until 2 weeks before the divorce is final. Then you quit your job. I sell my condo, and you break your lease. The day the divorce is finalized, we'll go to a resort for a week. If we still want a relationship after that, we'll move to another part of the country, rent an apartment together, and if we're still committed to each other, we'll get married. Eva covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered, crying and smiling at the same time. As we walked back to our apartments, holding hands, I felt more alive than I had in years. We kissed passionately at her door, neither of us caring about propriety. That night, for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. The first complication came early the next morning. At 7:50 a.m., my phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, I tensed. Hello, no. This is Donald Stanton, Heather's father, he said calmly but firmly. I'm hoping you can give Heather an hour extension on your 9 o'clock deadline so we can meet. I sighed, already on edge. Donald, the meeting won't change anything. Please, Noah, you have nothing to lose. If after an hour you still want the divorce, I guarantee Heather will choose the mutual consent option, and things will move forward quickly. You owe me this. I don't know I'm a damn thing, but the promise of speed appealed to me. Fine. When and where? I can be there in half an hour. See you then, I replied, hanging up. The meeting with Donald turned out to be a waste of time, though it confirmed something I already suspected. He had no clue who I really was. He tried every angle to convince me to stay married to Heather, emphasizing the economic benefits. You'll end up incredibly wealthy, he argued. He even offered $2 million in cash and promised a post-nuptial agreement that would guarantee me another $2 million if Heather ever changed her mind. Sorry, Donald, I replied coldly. You've done everything you could for your little girl, but there's no deal. As Donald left, his shoulders slumped. He seemed more upset about Heather's need for therapy than the end of our marriage. I couldn't fathom why Heather wanted to stay married. I'd assumed she'd be glad to move on, but perhaps it wasn't about love or loyalty. She had likely convinced herself that her behavior wasn't cheating, but rather a loss of focus on what was important. Regardless, I wasn't interested in hearing more excuses. Don't forget to ever sign the papers and deliver them to my lawyer this morning, I said before closing the door. The day finally came when the divorce was finalized. Neither Heather nor I attended the hearing. Only our lawyers were present. I showed up at the courthouse afterward to obtain a copy of the resolution for myself. It felt surreal, like turning the last page of a long, exhausting chapter. Afterward, I went straight to Eva's apartment, my luggage in hand, ready to leave for the resort we'd planned to visit. She opened the door dressed only in high heels and an ankle bracelet. Smiling mischievously, she said, "We have some time to get to know each other better before the drive. Besides, I don't think you're in any condition to sit through 2 hours in a car." She pointed teasingly at the unmistakable evidence of my excitement. Without waiting for an answer, Eva grabbed my tie and pulled me into her apartment. Since her bed had already been removed as part of her move, the couch cushions were arranged on the living room floor. We kissed passionately as she unbuttoned my shirt, pulled down my pants, and worked her magic. I reveled in her beauty, caressing her flawless body and savoring every moment. When she whispered, "Now make love to me," I gave in completely. Her body responded to me in ways I hadn't imagined, her thighs wrapping tightly around me as her muscles contracted powerfully. The sensation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and when we reached our peak together, it was an intense, almost surreal moment. "Those were the first real connections I've had in years," she chirped, grinning up at me. "It's because I'm a wonderful partner," I teased, earning a laugh and a playful swat. "No, it's because we made love, not just something else," she said, her tone soft and serious. "I love you, Eva," I said, meaning it completely. "I love you too, Noah," she replied, kissing me deeply. After another round of passionate lovemaking, we finally dressed, loaded our suitcases into the car, and began to drive to the resort. Eva snuggled against me for the first hour, her presence a comfort I didn't know I'd been missing. Then she sat up, looking serious. "I need to tell you 4 things," she said. "I can't wait any longer. If we're going to have a future together, I need to get this out now." "Okay," I replied, smiling. "I'm ready." "First," she began, "my name is Eva Carter. It's Beverly Flores, Bev for short. I have a set of fake IDs that are good enough to lease apartments and buy cars. If things work out between us, I plan to shed that old identity completely and cut ties with my past." "Wow," I said, impressed. "You could work for the CIA. Should I start calling you Bev now?" "Not until you put a ring on it," she teased, her laugh breaking the tension. "Okay, Eva. What's next?" "Second, I stopped working as a companion the day I told you I loved you," she said. "I also accelerated through my community college program. I finished my freshman year and even earned some sophomore credits." "That's incredible," I said, genuinely amazed. "You keep surprising me." She grinned. "Third, I've developed a concept for an online business. After the resort, I want to share the idea with you. If you like it, I hope we can partner 50-50. "I can't wait to hear about it," I replied, my curiosity piqued. "Finally," she said, taking a deep breath, "this is the hardest one. If you have questions about my past as a companion, you need to ask them this week. After that, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Any mention of it will upset me." Though the topic clearly made her uncomfortable, I decided to keep things light. "I have one question," I said after a pause. She looked at me expectantly. "Go ahead." "You said you charged $700 an hour, right?" I asked. "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "Well," I said with a grin, "now that I know what it's like, why didn't you charge 10 times that?" She laughed, kissed my cheek, and rested her head on my shoulder. "That's the last time we'll talk about this," she said softly. The resort was everything I could have dreamed of and more. Snorkeling, jet skiing, hiking, beach volleyball, and dancing filled our days with fun and laughter. But it was the nights that were unforgettable. Every moment with Eva felt like a celebration of love, passion, and connection. The way she looked at me, the way she kissed me, the way she held me, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. For the first time in years, I felt alive, whole, and truly happy. On the 5th day of our trip, I proposed to her, unable to imagine my life without her. Her joyful yes filled the room, and I knew I had made the best decision of my life. Though I wanted to marry her immediately, Bev, as she revealed her true name, wanted to include her few close relatives in a small, meaningful ceremony. I respected her wishes, and we decided on a 3-month engagement. When we returned home, everything fell into place. Within 9 months, Eva earned her associate degree in business administration, proving her determination and brilliance. Together, we grew my software business and launched her online venture, a platform that revolutionized internet promotions. Her idea was as innovative as it was successful, and 3 years later, we sold the business for a 7-figure sum. It was a financial triumph, but more importantly, it marked a new chapter in our lives. Now, as we sit in our new home, preparing for the next adventure, Bev, my best friend, partner, and soulmate, gives me the most life-changing news of all. She's pregnant. As I hold her in my arms, the future stretches before us, full of possibilities. It isn't just the thrill of success or the joy of love that makes this moment extraordinary. It's the realization that, together, we've built something more than businesses or homes. We've built a life, one rooted in trust, partnership, and a love that only deepens with time. Looking into her eyes, I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. And for the first time in a long time, I feel complete. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.